Thank you so much to Squarespace for continuing to support my art channel. Hello and welcome! I'm here with super exciting news at last. The pre-orders for my new art book sketch collection called HALCYON Days are now up in my store, which is cosmicspectrum.art. For once, I want to start with the actually important information, which is that I'm having a huge sale as well. It's probably the biggest sale I've had in my shop in a very long time. Very heavy discounts on almost everything, pretty much like 99% of my merchandise. And I also have some really great bundles available that are super discounted as well. And so the biggest important piece of information is that the early bird pricing is limited to 1 week. So only the first week of pre-orders will have the super discounted pricing. So if you're interested in this book and you want to help me with the production costs and support this channel and my work, please consider making an early pre-order and take advantage of this discount, and that'll help me a lot. So now that that's out of the way, I can just talk about the illustration, which I'm showing you the process of in this video, and it happens to be the cover of my new art book. So, the process of this illustration was pretty long and actually pretty convoluted. As you can see, I'm already starting with a base sketch, which I actually ended up doing digitally. I was mulling this over for a little while. I had the basic idea for the cover of the sketchbook to do an illustration that's a little bit similar to one I did last year, which includes a lot of collage elements. So it's the only thing I've ever really done that's like that, and I really liked how it turned out. The one I'm talking about has HALCYON and Noel, and there is a video process of that actually if you scroll through my channel. But anyways, so that's the idea that I decided on, and I thought that it would be really nice to have an actually kind of a sketchy type of illustration that, although is relatively finished and polished and detailed, still has a sketchy feel, which would obviously go well with the main theme of this art book, which is a sketch collection. So after I decided on the idea, it took me a little while to come up with a good composition that I was happy with, and actually it was a lengthy process. Like, it usually doesn't take me that long to get a base sketch going, but this one was difficult. And so I started with a couple of really scratchy thumbnail type of drawings in my sketchbook with a ballpoint pen, and I liked how those looked, but they were like super quick and they weren't very resolved at all. So it kind of gave me a basic idea. Obviously, as you can see, I want to do a big group big group image, I guess. And I set out to digitally sketch out the composition because I knew I was going to have to move things around a lot. And it took me forever. It took several tries for me to actually get the nice, like, I guess, resolved composition before I could actually get to the fun part of the drawing, which is just sketching out all the details and whatnot. So as you probably noticed, the base sketch was super simple. It basically was just placement and proportions, but it had very little details. And what you basically saw me do in the beginning there is to transfer. Well, first I printed out the base sketch, and then I transferred it pretty loosely onto this nice piece of non-textured Bristol paper. Wait, is it Bristol? No, it's not Bristol. It's just mixed media paper. I don't remember exactly what kind, but it is not watercolor paper. And I picked it because it's smooth, because I knew I was going to shade with a pencil later on. So that was the reasoning behind choosing this particular paper. But in any case, so now, as you can see, I erased a lot of the sketch, so it's very light, so I can just see where all the characters are going to be, and I can thus make some informed decisions about the placement of the collage elements. And while you see me fumbling with the collage stuff, I just wanted to quickly actually tell you some details about the sketchbook sketch collection art book itself. So I was mulling over the size for a little while, and as you probably know, usually my art books are 8.5 by 11 or so. So this one is just a little bit smaller than that because it matched better to the majority of my actual real life sketchbook sizes, which is about 7 by 10. So it was much easier for me to coherently like put together the pages with that in mind, because a ton of the pages in this art book are scans of my sketchbooks. And I at first wasn't sure how much the page count was going to be, but I had a pretty conservative estimate at maybe like 64 pages or something like that. But after spending a long time collecting all the stuff and editing all the sketches and like picking the ones I liked most, I actually ended up with a whole 104 full color pages. Obviously not all of those sketches are in color, but the whole book is in color, and there's many colored illustrations and some more polished sketchbook pages as well. So yeah, those are the details, and I'll tell you a little bit about the cover as well. So for the cover, I decided to go with a soft cover with gold foil details, which is something I really love. I don't think I've ever really, like, aside from the first self-published book that I did, I've always had some sort of foil stamp on all my art books, and this one's going to be gold for the first time because previously it was holographic and red. So yes, I'm also in love with the soft touch matte lamination, which is something I'm gonna go with as well. I'm just waiting for the samples now, and I'll definitely share more of that stuff when I get it. It's kind of loosely in production already, so which is why I decided to do the pre-orders now, because I need to secure the rest of the funding to keep the production going. But it will happen regardless of how the pre-order is gonna go. I'm gonna make sure of it. It'll just be like way less stressful for me, like I've mentioned before, if I get a substantial amount of pre-orders that will cover the production costs for me. One thing I actually wanted to mention and talk about specifically is that I've been thinking about putting this book together for a while, and obviously as soon as I started thinking about it, I really started to consider the materials. It's something I'm very particular about, since I've done a bunch of my own self-published books before, but I also have worked with a couple of publishers. I have many different examples of how my work prints on different types of paper, and so I really wanted to elevate the quality of this one, especially since it has so many sketches and so many traditional drawings that are from my sketchbooks. I wanted to really feel like a sketchbook, and the thing that kills that feeling the most, in my opinion, when it comes to a bunch of other art books that I own, including some of my own, unfortunately, is shiny, glossy paper. So I really don't like glossy paper in art books, even though that is the most commonly found paper you will see in art books. And the reason why it's so common is because colors do print really nicely and vibrantly on glossy paper, and that is definitely noticeable to me. And I have no regrets about the types of paper that I've chosen before in my previous books, but I really wanted to have a matte finish on the pages, and so I had something like that. Like the pages in my previous art book with 3D Total Prism are matte finish, and they're basically like unfinished, uncoated paper, so it's not shiny. And I think it turned out beautifully and definitely has the vibe that I was hoping for. But I will say that I noticed, not even with just that book, but with a bunch of other books that I have that have uncoated paper, it does tend to eat the printer ink, like the printing ink, a little bit, and some of that like a little bit of the vibrancy of the original images is unfortunately lost. It's not the end of the world. I think the books still look great, but that's one of the biggest concerns that I had for printing this one. And I don't want to make assumptions super soon, but I will tell you guys that I did look at samples of paper, and there is this absolutely magical looking paper. It's called Munkin specialty paper, or something of the sort, and it is really vibrant when it comes to the printed colors, but it also has this beautiful matte finish that makes it look like just a page from a sketchbook. So I'm super excited. I'm ordering this paper, and I am currently waiting for samples, so we'll see how that turns out. But from the samples, like, I'm talking about the specific samples from my own art book, I've seen other samples with other people's work, and it looked absolutely beautiful, which is why I really wanted to try it out. So that's super exciting for the book printing making nerd in me, and I just wanted to share that with you guys because it's kind of I don't know, it's something I care about a lot, and I wanted to, I guess, tell you guys about it. So yeah, that being out of the way, like I said, pre-orders are up on my shop now, and it is cosmicspectrum.art, so check it out. But anyways, before I do go on with this video, I just wanted to take a quick minute to tell you about today's sponsor, Squarespace. As an independent artist, I have to juggle a lot of different projects, and a portfolio website upkeep isn't something I can spend a lot of time on, which is why I love using Squarespace. Once the initial setup is done, maintenance is very fast, so whenever I have something to add to my portfolio, uploading artwork and rearranging the gallery to look good only takes a couple of minutes. Squarespace has multiple modes of editing pages as well, which makes it super versatile, so you can just add a block of text or an image and move things around intuitively without any need for custom codes. There are also many fantastic e-commerce options on Squarespace, and you can have a full shop selling digital or physical goods, or a secret members only content area if that's your business model. If you want to start building your own website, head over to squarespace.com and get started right away. You can play around and see how quick and easy it is to make a professional looking website for yourself. Once you put it together and are ready to launch, you can head to squarespace.com/cosmicspectrumart and get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. And now back to the video. So, like I mentioned, it was a long process of back and forth. So once I managed to arrange the collage elements in a way that I was somewhat happy with, see, the thing about the sort of weird method that I have with collaging, which by the way is not very developed because this is only the second time I've tried something like this, it's a bit unpredictable because obviously all the different collage elements that I'm using are some stickers, some just like papers and whatnot. They all have different material, so I don't even know how the pencil is gonna go on top of that a lot of the time, so it's a bit of a toss-up. Like, it's very experimental, and they did run into some mild problems, but it wasn't like anything I couldn't work with for sure. And yeah, so after I stuck all the paper on and the collage element was good to go, I had to retrace the stuff that got covered up, which is what I did. And then afterwards, once I again had a good base of all the placement and the basic like proportions, I went into details with a pencil. So this was probably the longest portion of this illustration. I really took my time to get all the little details drawn in pencil, and I actually just wanted to tell you guys a little bit about how different this art process is from drawing digitally. It's kind of even hard to explain, but for someone like me who goes back and forth so much between digital and traditional art, and this is a good example of it being very mixed because, as I've mentioned, I started with a digital sketch and then I obviously did the bulk of it on paper, as you can see. But then afterwards, I did bring it back into a digital format, and I messed around with it in Photoshop, as you will see later on as well. I'll just kind of go over that at the end of this video. But since I sketch both traditionally and digitally, I really get to notice how differently the process can go. And the thing about sketching traditionally like this is something I almost never do. So most of my traditional sketches end up being warm-up doodles, just throwaway doodles. I do the vast majority of them with a pen, as you probably have seen many times on my art channel, because that's most of my content here at the moment, which I'm hoping will change soon. But anyways, yes, so I don't do a whole lot of sketching from my head without like using a reference and drawing something very specific very often, as I'm doing here. So that was very different, and it was so much fun. I've actually really forgotten how fun it is to draw like this specifically, where it's just experimental enough that allows for so much freedom to just kind of draw things out and see where they end up. And it's nice to erase. I have to say that I really kind of missed the ability to not be so precious and meticulous with lines, because I actually do have the option to fix things and erase, which it was so welcome. And for once, like, I wasn't sweating. Well, actually, I say for once, but the truth is I don't really sweat too much about like things being realistic or just like really nicely rendered or executed. That's not usually my top priority. My top priority in the vast majority of my illustrations tends to be just capturing the mood, and I do care a lot about composition, something that I actually wasn't super aware of until I started talking about my process and talking about my illustrations on this YouTube channel. And speaking of the composition, I guess I was talking about how fun the sketching process is. It is very fun, and I suppose that's a point complete. So the next thing I will talk about here is the composition. It took me a little while, like I mentioned, to come up with a nice composition for this, even when I was just thinking about it and doing little thumbnails. So once I decided to do the sketch, or once I got started on the initial sketch digitally, I did not record that process because, like I said, it was just brutal. Like, it was very difficult for me to make this composition work. I had so many throwaway things, and like I changed things so much that the process would have just been really annoying to watch. But also, I didn't want to put that extra pressure on myself for having like a smooth recording. There were so many pauses in between where I just like left it alone for a couple of days and then came back to it with fresh eyes, which helped quite a bit. At first, I was really beating myself up for how long it was taking me to get this composition right, or just getting anything that I liked at all. And then eventually, once I actually got to the point where I was kind of happy with what was happening on the sketch, I finally realized that the reason why it was taking me so long to get it right is because this is actually just a really difficult composition. Like, it's a difficult angle. It's a weird angle. It's kind of from above, but like, I don't know, it's hard to even explain. And there's so much character overlap, and then there's a lot of foreshortening. There's a guy playing guitar, which I don't know about you guys, but in my personal experience, it's one of the hardest things to draw. There's just like so many things that could go wrong. First of all, a guitar shape is difficult to just freehand without like a 3D model or something, especially from like a weird angle like this. And then secondly, like the size, it's so hard to determine how big a guitar is in relation to a person. And this is coming from someone who actually plays guitar. Like, I have a bunch of guitars at home, and I've been playing guitar for a long time. Not that I'm very good at it or anything, but it's something I like to do now and again. But yeah, even having experience, like, it's surprisingly hard to just pull this out of my head without a reference. So I did find a reference for this pose, thank God, which helped me a lot. So I looked at that during the very initial like sketching process, and yeah, so I was able to save myself by actually finding a reference for once, which is something I should probably do more often. But not only was the guitar hard, but like the angle of his face just really gave me so much trouble. Look at that, I have another piece of footage of Boris, my cat, messing with me. So he was just constantly around when I was working on this illustration, which is why I have a bunch of clips of him. It was very cute, a little bit annoying at times, but mostly just cuteness overload from that little guy. But yeah, so I actually tried to get a variety of angles for you guys as well, so you could get a sense of the process, I guess, in a little bit more of an intimate way, with an angle like this, as if you're sitting right here, just like Boris was. Just a little pan over here to show you guys him again. But yeah, so as I was saying, the composition gave me so much trouble. So yes, I had a reference for socks pose, and I did have something like a reference for Fiona, but I ended up making the pose quite different. So in the end, the reference was of no further use to me that I initially picked, which is not the best thing in the world. Like, I had to make all the poses work in conjunction with each other, so I had to make a lot of changes because I wanted the composition to flow. So I was like, it's a pretty simple idea. I just wanted to have the focal point or the main line, like the flowing line or whatever, of the cover be going from kind of like the top right corner to the bottom middle-ish. So that's something that you will be able to observe if you look at it, and it's actually something I had to enhance later on digitally as well, which is something I will come back to. But yeah, so placing the limbs is a big part of that for me. So that's something that really helps to kind of get the flow going across the illustration, especially one like this that is very detailed and has a lot of little weird elements and is kind of convoluted with collage and whatnot. So I had to, like, that's what makes drawings like this so tough sometimes, because it's almost impossible to just find a reference for this, because the poses are just way too specific. And another thing, like, I can't even really take a picture myself to use as a reference, because I'm always changing things on the go, and the amount of changes that I end up having is like, I would have to take 1,000 different reference pictures and then finally arrive at one that is the exact pose that I'm looking for, which is why references are just something that I don't even bother using most of the time, for better or worse. And I will say here, like I've said many times before, one of the things that makes it possible for me to draw stuff like this without a reference is because I do a lot of life drawing and figure drawing practice, which is what you see in most of my other videos. So I know that those are kind of like throwaway videos, and maybe they get a little bit samey after a while, but you know, that's just what it takes, I guess, to learn the important skills of being able to draw from my head. So yeah, I did, like I told you guys, I had a pretty solid plan with the composition and I had the idea for the collage, but I didn't plan that much digitally. One thing I did do was experiment with a cropped version of this illustration to fit on the cover. So I actually did that before any of this transferring and rendering with the pencil process. It's something I thought was necessary because I wanted to have a full illustration version, but I also wanted to have a cropped version for the cover, because it was going to be a 7 by 10 inch book, and I didn't want the cover to be just like super small, like for the figures to be super small on the cover, which is why I wanted to zoom in on the illustration a little bit, which I did. And so I had the correct ratio crop on lock in my Photoshop file, and I also figured out the placement for the title as well, and for my artist name Cosmic Spectrum in the top right corner with the little bookmark thing. And so after I knew where those things were gonna be, I pretty much kind of placed everything else around that. And then when I was done with the figures and the pencil lines, I guess, with pretty minimal rendering, like I didn't go crazy with trying to shade this whole thing. As you can see, I left a lot of parts white. There was no tonal differentiation between like hair or the clothes or anything like that, because I knew that I was going to do that with collage later on. At first, I was naive enough to think that I was going to do it on paper, actually. But then I realized it was stupid and I needed to do it digitally, because this drawing, even though it's like 9 by 12, which is typically the biggest size paper I work with, still the figures ended up being very small on it, and I knew that if I was gonna try to attempt doing screen tones by hand, it would take me forever and I probably wouldn't even be able to do it. So I made the very strategic choice to just scan it right there and then and continue to work on it digitally, which is what I'm about to show you. So after scanning this piece in 2 parts and stitching it together using the photo merge tool in Photoshop, I went on and put in just a couple of things. So I will zoom in and kind of take you through what I did. So the first thing I did was to clean up the scan and to adjust the contrast and just add a little bit of warmth into it. And it scanned wonderfully. I actually had some scanner troubles, unfortunately, going into this, but thankfully it ended up working. I thought it was broken for a second. But yeah, and you know, the images first scanned always look so terrible, but after just a little bit of work, like fixing the levels, and the tone really brings it back to life, and I was very happy with how the scan turned out. And so after I assessed the image, I decided to just bring in a collage, like 2 collage elements, one for the hair and a couple of other small objects or small areas of the drawing, which will be screen toned, and like screen tone texture, if you know what I'm talking about, like the manga screen tone dot type of thing. And the second texture I brought in was just like a pattern, like another collage type of pattern for the skirts and the pants of the characters. As you see me, I just flashed right there. And then I also wanted to kind of bring back that half moon type of compositional line that'll go across the page. Basically, the characters' heads are what are the parts that are dictating that swoop, composition swoop or whatever. Because there was so much white, I needed to bring a little bit more texture in the background just to get rid of it and to make sure that the white mostly falls on the focal point. And that was basically it. It was relatively simple to do this digital stuff, which is why I also don't have footage of that. And then I added a little bit of color, like I put in a pop of yellow on the guitar, and like Fiona's collar, as you can see, colored the eyes, just like tiny little details. But for the most part, it was pretty minimal with the digital textures, but I'm so very happy with how it turned out. I have these little papers, like I bought this texture pack of these sparkly looking torn papers ages ago from Creative Market, and my god, I have gotten so much use out of them. They're so nice. And yeah, those are the things that I used. And that's about it. This is the entire process of this cover illustration. I had so much fun working on it. I really want to draw more with pencil going forward. No lie, this time I actually want to do it. And I really hope you guys enjoyed this detailed explanation of how I went about it. It was so much fun. I'm so happy with how it turned out. And I'm even happier with the actual cover, which is right here. I added a little bit more collage elements just to, you know, keep rolling with it. And the title and the Cosmic Spectrum logo on the right hand side there, and some of the text on the back are going to be, and the spine text of course, are going to be the parts in gold foil. Super excited to see that. Can't wait to get the test in my hands, which is currently being made. And again, like I said, if you want to support me in my projects, please consider getting a copy as soon as possible in my shop. The early bird pricing is available for 7 days only, and even if you can't buy the book right now, that's totally fine. You can always help me by just subscribing to my channel, liking this video, and maybe sharing it with some friends who you think might like it. That would be super helpful as well. Thank you so much again, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.